Is it going live? What's going on? Hey, we are live. How's it going, everybody? It's Monday, June 16th. Happy Father's Day weekend.
Yeah, let's go.
All that good stuff.
Woo! Yar.
Boxes.
Yeah, today we're talking about packaging. As per usual, we're talking about molded fiber. We're going to talk about what it is, the type, so
This
much,
is
how
the
to do it.
Molded Fiber Today show.
That's right. It's the Molded Fiber Today show. And we're going to cover some news. So before we get to it, we've got these guys with us, as we do every day. We've got Corey Connors.
Good morning.
Manufacturing Podcast. What's up, man? How's it going?
Good. Life is good. Big news coming. Can't wait to talk about it.
Oh, can't wait. Then you got me, Avelio Matos, host of Packaging Unboxed podcast. We got Adam Peak, host of People of Packaging podcast. What's up, Adam? How are you going?
Hey, I hope. So I'm really just trying to say that ice cream does make me happy. But I had a great Father's Day regardless.
Every time. It's funny.
All right, guys. So, a couple things going on in the news. There's an article that came out yesterday on Fast Company about Loop, TerraCycle's Loop program. It says
Loop-a-doop, 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 loop-a-doop.
Why this revolutionary reusable packaging platform failed, except in France. And it kind of goes.
Here we go again.
And it goes into it kind of goes into how 6 years ago Loop launched, and the big expectation was that it was going to go across like all retail programs. Like we saw this. We spoke to Tom Zaki over there at TerraCycle, and he kind of broke down like how they're using it for Haagen-Dazs. They were testing it out with like oatmeal. You had to pay extra for the product. So if you're buying a $3 container of oatmeal, it was probably going to cost you like $8 or $13 for it because you're renting that container. And every time you brought the container back, they would, give you back the balance of whatever that container costs. Right. So you could reuse it. It would go through, you're paying for the collection, the cleaning, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And according to this information by Adele Peters, in this article on Fast Company, it's not necessarily working well, right? This milkman model doesn't work in the US. People aren't necessarily willing to pay an extra 30, 40%.
I've heard it's like wicked, so we had to kick it. I'm not shy, so I asked for the digit. I'm just going to quote Salt and Pepper for this whole article.
For the whole episode. But interesting, because, I know we talked about sustainability. We've always talked about reusability.
It's a great concept. Yeah. You're right. It's difficult to accept a $10 upcharge for an item that if you don't go with the Loop version, it's $10 less. And so it's very difficult to say, oh, you need to invest in this process. And I was thrilled and so excited to see it and to learn about it. And in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, and I currently live, it was one of the launch sites for it. And I went to 5 different Fred Meyer stores, which is our retail store here. And the people at the store didn't know what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a real implementation problem. And I think, they didn't really advertise it. They put it on an end cap. It looked great. The packaging looked great. It was really beautiful, well done. Things like Heinz ketchup, they used their glass bottle. They didn't even have to change their packaging. They just had to change the label, the adhesive on the label to be washed off, which was great. That's a very simple change, but people didn't want to bring their packaging back to the store. I think and maybe they didn't know about it. A lot of people like me who are in the industry were thrilled about it and excited to be a part of it, but it just didn't take off.
Here's the problem with reuse. Someone's got to pay the milkman.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest issue. It's not just the cost, the initial cost of the container, because I think people are willing to absorb that. It's that there's an economic problem with we have to then take this and then collect it and then clean it and then reuse it. And it's oftentimes significantly cheaper to just buy something new. So I had a company do this with glass, and they had these kind of smaller glass containers, and I was like, you have two sizes of glass containers. Why don't you use this reusability thing? And he said, well, we ran the numbers, and it was like 50 times more expensive to clean the glass and collect it and clean it and reuse it than it was to just buy new glass. So they were like, it makes no sense.
There's risk too. What if you don't clean it well? What if it chips? Then you have a sorting issue. There's so much more to do. Now there's different reuse models though coming to fruition that I'm really excited about, like Goodfill and things like that, where you bring in your own packaging and it basically dispenses it into it, and then you're paying on the kiosk, which I think is brilliant. This kind of
still risk with that though, right? Because what if I bring in my container and I didn't clean it correctly, and now it's contaminated, right? So I get why brands are going to be hesitant. I love the innovation. I love that people continue to push the envelope. I don't want to just be a naysayer. I want to be a nay slayer. Hello, Slay.
But
anyway, I just think that there's just inherent. It doesn't surprise me that Fast Company would be writing a negative article about how it's not working, because like a lot of innovation, it's going to struggle out of the gate.
It's not like they're out there looking to write negative articles. It's just, this is what's happening, right?
Oh, they might be looking to write negative articles, because that seems to drive drive content.
But the focus there was how it is working in France, which is interesting. And I think from that perspective, they're using it on wine bottles, or
very successful.
You're already paying you're already used to paying a premium. And then being able to recycle, you're bringing your own bags to stores. Like, there's a whole system built there that isn't really built into our culture here in the US. So it has to operate where it's easy to do.
And the French are just better than us.
Ask them; they'll tell you that. That's true.
We got Chris Olsen this morning. Does downcycling into lower value products actually solve the waste problem, or just delay it?
Somebody smart once said, on a long enough timeline,
everything
all ends up in the landfill. I believe.
Chris, I think that's a great question, though, Chris. I think the answer is it helps, and it delays the inevitable, like Avelio says. Yeah.
So it doesn't actually help. Right.
It helps.
Keep it in. I mean, so for every reused item, right? It means that's one less single-use item that had to be created and then dumped in the landfill. So if you can get 4, 5, 6 uses out of it, yes, eventually it's going to end up in the landfill.
Yes.
Or if you
she's not talking about recycling, reusing.
Yeah. I know. But if you put it, like, if you turn it into a park bench, and that park bench hangs out for 20 years, and you make a bunch of park benches, and that was not material that you had to make the park bench out of, right? It's material that's already existing. So it delays it. It's helpful. It's not the end all be all, though, I don't think.
Yeah. So
great alternative.
Choosing materials that are going to be downcycled into, and we talk about this quite often, right? If you're choosing materials that are going to be downcycled into something that's not circular, then it's linear. It's headed to the landfill at some point. Right, which is why it's great to talk about sustainability in circular fashion, right? Something that's going to be paper, which kind of leads us into this molded fiber conversation we're about to have, right? Because you're using long fibers that can be then recycled into other paper items that can then be recycled once again and continue that circular loop. But I always get a question on molded fiber. Like, a lot of startups love it. They see it in a lot of packaging. And they want to do it, but there's some challenges to that. So I kind of want to get into like just some basics here. We've got, this is molded fiber, right? Can you kind of break this down, Corey? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so this is a molded pulp tray or molded fiber tray for eggs, and it's a proven technology that's worked for many, many years, generally made from recycled paper fibers. And it's, like you said, very circular packaging. Oftentimes, these are even reused in a farm setting or in somebody. My brother has chickens, and they reuse these trays hundreds of times.
Yeah.
But it's an awesome alternative to polystyrene or PET, which are the other two generally used for eggs.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Adam?
I'm curious though, like there's so many like organic, free range sort of these products that you do see in like a clear PET with a paper wrap. Why would a brand that's, touting sustainability have a PET container versus a molded fiber one like this?
They often tout their life cycle analysis of the material.
Yeah.
And the molded pulp is oftentimes has a higher initial LCA. But when you look at the full life cycle, the cradle to cradle, you're gonna be a better performer with molded pulp generally.
Interesting. I did go to a wet molded fiber facility in China, and I will tell you the process that they were using to manufacture molded pulp was disgusting and like the whole thing was just like, oh my gosh, this is how these things are made. And the end product is really beautiful.
It's not a clean process.
Oh man, and it takes forever. The one I saw.
You're talking of like a powdered, coated environment where you're walking around and like you're getting misted with stuff. Like, as clean as the product looks at the end, the process.
Lots of water used.
You've got dry fiber. You've got a lot of steam going on. Yeah, it doesn't look
very energy intensive. A lot of water usage.
Yeah. Isn't that where the LCA does come in? And like you can whatever injection mold a PET tray pretty quick, and it's clean and
thermoforming is fast.
Yeah. They're all of it, right? Is like that's why you don't see molded fiber in like a clean room environment, is because of for various reasons, but
unless you're Apple,
it's because of the fibers, right?
Yeah, Apple's not in a clean room.
Apple's not in a clean room.
That packaging is not in a
particular packaging that I pulled here. Actually, is it's like a 3D.
Is that Google
render? No, this is an iPhone box.
Google has gone completely to paper, as we've talked about many times.
Yeah,
Miguel and the team over there do an amazing job.
Yeah,
for sure. But like I think people love to kind of go through this unboxing of Apple products, and like these are, this is a paper molded fiber, and the requirements to produce for Apple for those inserts for the boxes is a clean room environment.
Very high standard, right?
It is not. At least when I was in the facility that was making cell phone case packaging, I will tell you, it was far from a clean room environment. There are a solid 5,000 people who live. That's why Chinese New Year is a big deal, because people commute and they live there, right?
Right.
It was not clean room. I mean, it was meticulous. There was a lot of QA standards. But when I say clean room, I'm talking about like med device, pharma. That's not
it is not that level. Absolutely. But
it's like Apple trays are very different, and egg cartons are very different than Apple. I mean Apple like the fruit.
I like that. Apple trays versus Apple packaging.
Versus Apple packaging. You're going to see that's the ends of the spectrum, right? So one of them's going to be very dirty. The other one's going to be very clean.
All right. So before I get myself in trouble and say too much on the process, here's the difference, right? So you've got two ends of the spectrum. You've got this,
right, craft fibers.
Yeah, and you can see, you can zoom in to this. You can see this texture. This is the texture from the screens.
See lots of inclusions. Yeah.
Yep. But you can see like the texture from the screen on the inside is a little bit smoother. When you look at the outside,
it's not
you
working.
still have a little bit of that screen texture happening on there.
Gotta get closer at it.
Yeah, the loop isn't.
Then you've got your Apple iPhone type of packaging, which is completely smooth. You've got, some things. You've got these really sharp corners, some really deep depressions, and then you've got product like this from James Cropper. This is like taking molded fiber and making something completely different. I can kind of show this one too, but this is like a bottle wrap, and then you've got a product like this, which was designed by Chris Wilson for this one single bottle that I think sells for like $20,000-$30,000.
Beautiful.
Yeah, amazing, right? So you can like custom make molded fiber. And I think a lot of times people think of molded fiber when they see Apple and they're like, I want that for my package.
Mm-hmm.
But the cost to do this, let's kind of get into what it requires to do this type of thing. And this is the exception, because this was only literally this is a one of one molded fiber bottle design, like everything. But you can get into some mass production stuff that's pretty intricate, pretty beautiful, something really simple, extremely technical, or something that's very basic.
What are your thoughts, Avelio, on dry molded fiber? Like Polpak is a company I know is
really cool,
doing like more commoditized things like utensils and plates and yogurt cups and stuff like that.
Being that it's not packaging, I don't really have much.
Well, yogurt cups are. I mean, they are trying to replace like polypropylene.
When you put
packaging.
So, not having given that much thought, because I don't work in that space, I'll give you my gut reaction on that stuff.
Yeah.
If you're talking about plates, cutlery, anything that has to do with interacting with food, which
preach it, brother. Let's go.
It's typically gonna have some level of moisture, have some juice.
Moist.
Right? Juice is loose.
Moist.
Here I go.
You're gonna have to have some kind of a barrier, right? So when we're talking plates, you've got to have a barrier over the top of that. When it comes to different barriers, I think before we hopped on here, we were kind of talking about like PFAS. Is that an opportunity to introduce that? Yes. Does this company introduce that? I don't know. I doubt it, but that's where you get into some of these issues. If you're doing any type of other like poly-based barrier coat on there, is that going to recycle well? Is that just adding, is that taking something that is meant to be recycled, applying a plastic in some way, whether it's like a vinyl, nylon, whatever, and making it more difficult to recycle and not necessarily solving a problem, right? Like that's where my head kind of goes. Is like, what are we giving up by moving that stuff into there? Yeah, cool packaging, cool product, cool material, but does it necessarily relate to, does it really solve the problem we're looking for?
And I think the biggest plus is that this material can be recycled easily almost everywhere in the world, whereas the PET is more of a challenge.
Yeah, and just looking at John Gregory's comment here, sorry, Corey, you've disappeared. It says the problem with LCA is that plastic doesn't generally take into account the energy required to find, extract, process, and deliver the natural gas, petroleum products in the first place. They only typically look at the energy needed to convert already produced plastic pellets or sheets into finished goods, which is missing the whole environment. That's a great.
It's really insightful. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I do think that you can work within, like I've done some work within the TREAC tool running LCAs, and there are tools that will factor in this information.
Yeah.
The thing that I just struggle with LCAs sometimes, because it seems as though everybody says like actually, this is what's going on. And it's you can manipulate the data sometimes to make your point known. Yeah. So it's like the molded fiber people will say, well, this is what's going on within the LCA, and this is why it's always skewed. And then the plastic people say, well, no, we actually figure this stuff out. And I don't know, it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes.
So what, all right, so if somebody's out there and they're thinking, I want to do molded fiber, right? Let's kind of go just through the process.
Yeah.
To do anything like this, one, there's design. Right? You have to work with a designer, engineer that understands how this even comes together, how the material is going to function, how the material is going to act, the different methods, like choosing the proper method for this. And then you've got to find a supplier, right? A supplier that can actually do the level of detail that you're looking for. So if you're looking for something like this, you wouldn't be talking to the same company that's doing this.
Right.
Right. If you're looking at if you're looking at egg carton level quality,
stock versus custom, right?
Yeah. Versus this, this is heat pressed on the outside, on the inside. This is not.
Is any of this stuff made in the United States that you're
showing? Yes, a lot
Sure.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this one's made in the UK.
Okay.
But I mean, they make stuff all day long in the US.
We're making egg carton packaging. We're not importing it from
correct
other countries.
It's domestic. Same with Apple, like fruit.
And you've got like Footprint here in Arizona. I mean, they've got plants all over the world now. I don't know what they do now, but they produce here in Arizona.
Okay. They make egg carton packaging in Arizona?
Not egg carton.
I'm talking about like commoditized molded fiber.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Including also wine trays that are molded fiber are made. There's actually a place in Oregon that makes them. Lots of production in the U.S. because if it wasn't made right here, it would be very expensive to ship.
Benefits. So, all right. So if I'm a startup and I'm looking to do molded fiber, one, you've got to design it. Two, you got to find a supplier. You can reach out to any one of us to connect you with a supplier.
Apparently not me. Reach out to Avelio or Corey because I apparently don't know where the stuff gets made. I know a couple of suppliers. I've been to one in China, and I know the folks down at Footprint. That's all I got.
So there's that. Then a lot of times people look at like the Apple packaging, they see like how sharp and how deep these angles go. Right. I mean, this is what what you'd be talking about would be like a draft angle, right? And that's going to be where it separates from the tool. So it can't be like a 90-degree corner that just goes straight down because there's not enough space for that, vacuum to be broken in order to separate the piece from the tool. Apple, I think, has like the tightest draft angle out there, but they can afford it. Right, that's going to cost money, slower process, more detail.
They've revolutionized that. Yeah,
completely. They've built factories around this.
Is it all still paper?
Is it all still paper? No. I can't say yes or no. But like if you're looking at this, these are your draft angles, right? Like this angle of that cone. It's super. One, it fits the egg, but two, it's super loose so that you can separate this up pretty easily. It is a commodity. With this stuff that you're seeing from James Cropper, it's pretty sharp along the edge here, but you're seeing all of this molded information happening on here. It's like debossed, embossed, really sharp on the text, super smooth on the outside. I've got a sample here, which is, let's see.
They won a big award for their champagne.
Yeah, they did. They win pretty frequently. And the one thing that I do love about theirs is this lock feature.
That's neat.
It's like, it just snaps in place, and you got all the texture, you've got all the color, you've got, you can change the color of the pulp.
Really neat.
So definitely something cool, but it's going to cost you. I think, and this is the part that I think most people don't get, is the cost of the piece is nothing. The cost of the tooling is expensive.
Right.
And that's why if you're a startup and you're like, hey, I only need 500, To make these things is pennies. Like this particular, like something that big is a couple pennies. Same thing. If a box like this big is pennies, but the tooling can be how much can that tooling be, Corey, Adam?
Tens of thousands, depending on the scope, the size of the platen press or the rotary.
Definitely dozens or more.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen. We got Matt here, who's super familiar. We got the smaller the draft angle, the higher the scrap rate, which results in slower times and more cost. Apple also spends months to years engineering those trays. It feels like that's out of range for most companies, especially absolutely. And that process of engineering that insert is revision after revision, production. Your draft angles like this. Next production, it's slightly less, right? And then finding, the corners, the shapes that function. Definitely not doable for a startup, but even tens of thousands. I've seen in the 80 to 90,000 for tooling, right? Like, and places that like Footprint, like at Footprint, I've seen tools that are like 3-4 feet wide by 4 by 4, and that's just for like one process, right? Where you're just shaping it, and then it's got to go, and that's like 2 pieces, male and female, for that thing. Tens of thousands for that tool. Then it's got to go to step 2, which is going to be like your pressing, and then the third step, if you want it to be smooth. And each of those tools is tens of thousands. And the finer you want, the more processes you have to go through, the more cost you have to spend. Right? And then if you want to make a change to it, you got all new tooling. Right. You got to do that all over again.
So if there was a company in Chicago, how much would the tooling cost to make a molded Pope? Just... Could we have a molded Pope made from Pope Leo in Chicago? There's a company in Chicago that could do this, you think?
I think so.
Absolutely.
On the show. I need to know, how much is this going to cost?
How big do you want him? What's he going to hold?
Life size.
Oh, life size.
Yeah, for sure.
We might want to suggest corrugated for that.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Molded Pope.
So to wrap the show up on molded fiber, I think if you're a startup and you're interested in molded fiber, there are some stock options that may be available to you. Maybe doing like corrugated inserts. Yeah. That might be a better solution, right? Because as you're starting up, there's always going to be change. It's never going to be perfect. Like your product's going to shift, your product's going to change. You might have you might be selling one product and all of a sudden you come up with a second one that is going to increase sell through if you sell them together. So you're going to have to change your insert. Like, I think you've got to be at a pretty steady place to launch, unless you're a super well-funded startup that's going to hit tech and you've got the money to change packaging in 6 months. But as most startups, I think moving into something in corrugated first, get consumer buy-in, make sure everything ships properly, make sure everything displays properly, whatever, all those different phases that tend to happen in that startup. Molded fiber is not something I'd recommend for you until you're ready to hit the big time.
Avelio says we should use foam. That's what he just said.
That's not what I said.
I heard corrugated.
I heard we need foam inserts.
Yeah. Whatever, dude. All right, we're going to wrap this up. If you got any questions on molded fiber, let us know. If you're looking for somebody to design packaging and inserts, check out Matt Hansley and the team over at Enlisted. Reach out to Matt Hansley. This guy knows his molded fiber frontwards and backwards. Forwards.
He can make my molded Pope.
He could make your molded Pope.
I'll be right over, Matt. I'm probably 10 minutes away from the office.
Life size.
Maybe just a molded Pope hat.
Let Bo know I'm on my way.
All right, guys.